Hello everyone, in this video we are going to be looking at 1.2 classification of businesses, and the further information of what we are going to study is in front of you. So the first thing is talking about classification of businesses in terms of primary, secondary and tertiary. So the primary level is looking at the stage where the natural resources are taken out of the earth. For example, with this example of the wooden table, the primary stage is the woodcutter. So they are sourcing the wood from the earth. The next stage is the secondary stage, which converts the natural resources and turns them into goods. In this example, it would be the furniture maker. And the last one is the tertiary stage. This involves providing services to both consumers and other businesses. And in this tertiary example, it would be the retailer who sells the furniture to customers. There are some other examples here in front of you as well, and some more examples if you want to pause the video and have a look. So just to recap, primary sectors extracts and uses the natural resources of earth to produce raw materials. Secondary sector manufactures goods using the raw materials provided by the primary sector, and tertiary sector provides services to consumers and the other sectors of industry. Now on to the next part, talking about industrialization and deindustrialization. Now, industrialization is usually for developing countries because they are using, they are using more manufacturing to change their, source their economy. So they are making more money from the secondary sector, from the secondary stage, from manufacturing. Now, developed countries, for example, the UK and the US, they have often experienced deindustrialization. This means that their factories have closed and they are now making more money from tertiary sectors. So when they move from secondary to tertiary sectors, they are experiencing deindustrialization. It's when there is a decline in the importance of the secondary sector of the country. If we look at the examples here, I'm going to read this out to you. So the changes in sector importance. In the UK and other developed economies, there has been a decline in the importance of manufacturing industry or the secondary sector since the 1970s. The tertiary sector in the UK now employs well over 75% of all workers. Many workers who lost jobs as factories closed have found it difficult to obtain work in the service industries. The decline in the manufacturing or secondary sector of industry is called deindustrialization. Now, the changing of importance for the UK has now gone from the secondary sector to the tertiary sector because over 75% of all workers now work in the tertiary sector, which means that this is very important for their economy. In China and India, the relative importance of the secondary sector has increased since the 1980s compared to the primary sector. However, in both countries, many of the tertiary sector industries are now expanding more rapidly than those in both the primary and secondary sectors. There are several reasons for changes in the relative importance of the three sectors over time. For example, sources of some primary products such as timber, oil and gas become depleted. This has been true for Somalia with the cutting down of most of its forests. So if a country is now experiencing, they've lost all of their primary sources, they cannot then make money from them. So they have to move to a different sector to make money. Most developed economies are losing competitiveness in manufacturing to newly industrialized countries such as Brazil, India, and China. So in American businesses, it's much cheaper for them to get their products made in developing countries such as China, India, and Brazil. So they send their information over to these countries. They are then produced there and it's much cheaper. And then they are sold for a much higher price in the developed countries. As a country's total wealth increases and living standards rise, consumers tend to spend a higher proportion of their incomes on services such as travel and restaurants than on manufactured products produced from primary products. So as you have more of a disposable income in a country, that means that probably it's a developed country, which means that there's more emphasis on the tertiary sector. And how do we know whether a sector is important or not? Now, there are two ways. The first one is whether there are lots of people employed in that sector. So how many people are employed will matter, because it will mean how many people are receiving a standard wage and so are therefore able to spend money within that country. And the second one is consumers. So how much money are people spending on a sector? So that will then increase the importance of that sector to the country, because it depends on how much money is coming in. Now going to move on to the last one, between private sector and public sector businesses. So we have primary, secondary and tertiary, that being the 3 stages of production. But then you can also classify businesses between the private sector and the public sector. Private sector businesses are owned by private individuals, and public sector businesses are owned by the government or state agencies. For example, private sector businesses within Vietnam include Vingroup, Singapore International School, we've got Family Hospital and Vietjet. There are some, for public sector, some healthcare hospitals are owned by the government, some Vietnamese public schools, you've got some public transport options. For example, the bus from Hoi An to Da Nang is subsidised by the government as well, so you would say that's a public sector. If you have a public plus private sector businesses, it means that you have a mixed economy. If you have businesses moving from the private sector to the public sector, this means that nationalisation is happening to the business. If you have a business moving from the public sector to the private sector, this means that it's privatisation is happening. Again, mixed economy is when the economy comes from the public and private sector businesses. That's the end. Thank you for watching. Please use this video in conjunction with your notes and your textbook.